There was a time when I could sit down and play a video game for 6 hours, 7, 8, and not once think about what else I should be doing. I could start a game in the afternoon and suddenly it was dark outside. I don't know if you know the feeling. And somehow that didn't feel like 6 hours. It felt like maybe 20 minutes. I don't know exactly when that changed, because I still like games. I still get excited when a new game comes out. I still have those moments where I completely lose track of time. But sometimes I'll start playing, and 20 minutes later I'll find myself thinking, should I really be doing this? And that's when I started wondering something. Did games actually change, or did I? When you're younger, games can feel enormous. They're not just something you do when you have some spare time. They're the thing you're doing. You might have a game you can't stop thinking about at school. You talk about it with your friends. You think about what you're going to do when you get home. You know the maps, you know the characters, you know the little secrets nobody else knows. And when you finally get home, you turn the console on or PC, whatever you play on, and you're gone. There's something incredibly pure about that. You don't need a reason. You don't need to justify it in any way. You aren't thinking about whether the 6 hours you spent playing were productive. You aren't thinking about your career, your bank account, your house, your responsibilities, your future. You are just playing a game. And I think that's one of the things we miss when we say we miss old games. Maybe we don't actually miss the games, but maybe we miss how easy it was to become completely absorbed by something. And that's kind of what I am experiencing right now with Overwatch. Because eventually life gets louder. You get older, you have work, bills, people who depend on you, things you need to fix, messages you need to answer, things you promised yourself you would do. And even when none of those things are particularly urgent, they're still somewhere in the back of your mind. So you sit down to play, you load into a match, everything is going well, you're having fun, and then, for absolutely no reason, a tiny voice appears. You probably should be doing something else. And it's ridiculous. Because when you were younger, you could spend an entire Saturday playing games and never feel guilty. Now you can have an entirely free evening and somehow feel guilty for spending an hour doing exactly what you wanted to do. That's a strange part of getting older. You gain more freedom, but sometimes you feel like you have less permission to enjoy it. And I don't think this is because games suddenly became worse. Obviously, some games are worse, some games are better. Some are designed to keep you playing forever, and some are genuinely incredible. But I don't think that's the whole explanation, because I've gone back to games I absolutely loved when I was younger, and sometimes they just don't hit the same. You remember them being incredible, you remember the feeling, you remember where you were sitting, maybe the smells even. Maybe you remember who you were playing with. You remember staying up too late. You remember the excitement of unlocking something for the first time. Or maybe your first ace or triple kill. And then you start the game again, years later, and you think, that's it? And maybe that's disappointing in a way. But maybe we're asking the game to recreate something it never actually created. Maybe the game wasn't the source of the feeling. Maybe we were. Think about an old game you loved. Maybe it was Minecraft, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, The Sims, Halo, Grand Theft Auto, whatever it was. You probably remember more than the game itself. You remember a bedroom, a particular computer, a television, a friend sitting next to you, someone yelling from another room, "It's dinner!" A summer holiday, being awake at 2 in the morning, or maybe sitting up all night just playing through a game. A time when you didn't know what the next 10 years of your life were going to look like. And that's something games can accidentally preserve. They become little time capsules. You don't just remember playing the game, you remember who you were when you played it. And that's why going back can be so weird. You're not really going back to the game, you're going back to yourself in a way. And unfortunately, that person isn't there anymore. You grow up, you get older. There's also something else I've noticed. When you're younger, you don't really care if you're good at something, you just play. But as you get older, everything starts becoming measurable. Rank, stats, achievements, hours played, win rate, progress, and maybe completion percentage. Even our hobbies start looking like things we're supposed to optimize, and gaming is particularly good at this. You can always get better, you can always climb, you can always unlock something. You can always complete another challenge. And that's not necessarily bad. But sometimes I wonder if we've forgotten something. We're allowed to be bad at things. We're allowed to play a game badly. We're allowed to lose. We're allowed to spend an hour doing something that doesn't make us better at anything. And I think that's becoming increasingly difficult to remember. Because almost everything around us seems to ask, what are you getting out of this? Maybe that's why gaming can feel different. Not because the games changed, but because our relationship with time changed. When you're younger, time feels almost infinite. You don't really understand how quickly years disappear. A Saturday feels enormous, a summer feels endless, a year is basically forever. Then you get older, and suddenly you're saying things like, I can't believe it's August already. And eventually you start understanding something you didn't really understand when you were 16. Time is actually the most valuable thing you have. And once you understand that, it's very easy to start treating everything that doesn't feel productive as a waste. That's kind of the trap. Because if you only allow yourself to do things that are productive, eventually you don't really know how to relax. You don't know how to play, you don't know how to be bored. You don't know how to do something simply because you enjoy it. And maybe that's the part I want to get back. Not necessarily playing games for 6 hours, not trying to become 16 again. That's impossible, right? I have no interest in pretending that getting older is something we should escape. There's a lot about getting older that I actually like. You understand yourself better, you know what matters to you, you become less interested in impressing everyone, at least sometimes. You start realizing that most people aren't paying nearly as much attention to you as you thought they were. There's something nice about that, but I think we lose things too. And maybe one of those things is the ability to disappear into something for a while. To play badly. To get excited about something meaningless. To spend an evening doing absolutely nothing useful and not feel like you failed at life. Maybe that's what games can still give us. Not nostalgia, not productivity, not achievement, just play. So, do games feel different when you get older? I think they do. But maybe not because the games changed, maybe because we brought our adult lives with us. Responsibilities, expectations, the comparisons. The feeling that we should always be doing something more important. And maybe that's why an old game can feel disappointing when you return to it. Because you're expecting it to give you back a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to become that person again. Maybe we can just appreciate that they existed, and every once in a while we can sit down, turn the game on, but put everything else aside and play. Not because we're trying to accomplish something, not because we're trying to escape our lives, just because for a little while it's fun, and maybe that's enough. I think I forgot that for a while, and maybe you did too. Okay, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.